can you please turn on your cameras so we can see your awesome faces? If you're able to, I think most of you are able to. All right, so we will get started with the panelists very shortly. But before, I just wanted to do a quick intro. For those of you that don't know me, I feel like I know most of y'all, but if y'all don't know me, my name is Melissa Sanchez. I'm a student success coach here along with my colleagues, Karina and Bianca, who worked also very, very hard to get this set up along with our student employees. So I'm so grateful for them to just even allow us to have this event right now. So please give them a round of applause. Just a lot of them. We are so honored, honestly, to have every single one of you here present with us to hear the stories of the following first-gen panelists. We hope you're as excited as we are. And before we allow the panelists to introduce themselves, we just have a few announcements. So as you know, this week is First Gen Week. And for those of you that may not be familiar with First Generation for a student or even a professional identifies as a student that is pursuing their education when their parents have not pursued either a bachelor's degree in the United States. So that's how we define it here at MCC. A lot of the times, maybe if you came across the application during the MCC, or even if you're planning on transferring, a lot of the times they ask if you're first gen. And if you qualify under their definition, you can actually probably be guaranteed some money for scholarships or different types of like fellowships and internship programs, specifically just for your first gen status. Being a first gen is not an easy thing to do. You're basically paving the path for the generation that follows you. And it comes with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And trust me, I would know, because many of us, especially the professionals here in the room, and even on our panel, we did this. So I really want to applaud for those of you that qualify as a first gen. But even if you're a neighbor, maybe if you're a neighbor sitting next to a person that maybe you're like, I'm not a first gen, please applaud your neighbor. So can we give a round of applause to all of our first gens here? Thank you. All right. Second, I just ask that you are staying engaged during this presentation. Our panelists are taking really a lengthy amount of time here out of their day to be here with you. Many of them are actually probably still at work right now. So please be engaged, and then we will also go ahead and allocate time at the end of the panel for Q&A time. So if you have questions, please have your questions ready. So then that way, by the time that we open that time up, we can kind of just get it at a rollout, because I want to make sure that I'm respectful of their time as well, so they can get back to what they got to do. So this far, if you have not done the attendance, make sure you are doing so, because that attendance is actually going to allow you to be entered into the raffle, not only for today's raffle, but also for the weekly raffle for after the first gen, where you can win first prize of AirPods, second prize a $50 Amazon gift card, and the third prize is an Echo 3, so do not forget to do that. We will let panelists know on Friday who is the winner. If you have any questions, those who are on Zoom, please raise your hand feature, and then those who are, Zoom, raise hand feature, and those who are here, we'll make sure that we give you the mic so you can ask your questions to the panelists. All right, are we ready to go? Woo-hoo! Let's get started. All right, so let me see who I got here. All right, who do I want to call on first? Let's go ahead and get started with Monica. Do you mind introducing yourself and just giving yourself a little bit of a background, schooling, maybe where you went for undergrad, for graduate school, anything important that we might need to know as a panelist?
Sure. Hey, everybody. First, I'm just going to tell you, if you hear any dogs in the background, I'm really sorry, and I might mute myself because they just start barking like crazy. I'm working from home. So anyways, that aside, my name is Monica Pedroza. I am a 7th year associate in the law firm of Morgan, Lewis and Bacchius. It's a national law firm that has an office in Chicago, which is where I work out of. I have a bit of a journey making it to Illinois. I actually am from the Los Angeles area. That's where I grew up. And then I went to college at Georgetown University, which is really far away in Washington, D.C. After going to school there, I worked for about 4 years as a paralegal, hoping to go to law school, but not really sure about it, and wanting to sort of see if the legal profession was for me. Ultimately, I decided that I wanted to pursue my law degree. And so I applied to a ton of law schools, and was very, very fortunate to get into Northwestern Law School in Chicago. And I then moved to Chicago, and that's where I completed my law degree. And then I have stayed here and have worked at this firm. I practice commercial litigation, generally on the defense side. So I am representing mostly large companies in defense of all types of litigation, from products liability to contract law to environmental work. In my pro bono practice, which is the practice that I do, pro bono, so without a fee, I do a lot of immigration work. That's really important to me. And I have been doing that since I was in law school. So that's me in a nutshell. Happy to meet you guys, and happy to answer any of your questions today.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm gonna put the next person here, Raquel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Raquel Chavez. I am currently going into my 4th year as an assistant district attorney at the Bronx County District Attorney's Office in New York City. I've been cross-designated now as a human trafficking, special victims, and domestic violence ADA. So I've been doing a lot of that type of work. So literally Law and Order SVU is my job. So I went to undergrad at Northern Illinois University. I'm a double Husky, so I went to law school there as well. I graduated in 2015 from undergrad, and then 2018 from law school. So I'm one of the ones that went straight through. I then took the bar exam, the New York bar exam, in July 2018, moved out here August 2018, and I've been here ever since. I am born and raised in Illinois and currently don't have any intentions on coming back, but very much enjoying my time out here. It was a very long roundabout way of me getting into prosecution work. I was actually, all of my internships, externships, clinics were done in family law while I was in law school. And it's tangentially related to domestic violence work in a way. So I've always had an interest in helping people with problems, and I can hope to continue on in that vein. So I guess my next step would be to decide whether I want to stay in this state office or go federal. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you, Raquel. All right, I'm gonna go on to George.
Hello, everyone. My name is George Gomez. I am a criminal and immigration attorney. Recently just based in Chicago, but I am moving into the Lake County area. I'm also a double Husky. I was from undergrad in Northern Illinois and also did law school at Northern Illinois as well. I've been practicing for about 7 to 8 years. Recently, I was at one of the biggest Latino law firms in Chicago, where I was a senior attorney, and now I am a partner at a McHenry-based law firm called Donahue and Associates, where we're going to create a firm in Lake County. So again, I primarily do criminal at this moment, and it's criminal defense. So I defend anything from small retail thefts to anything in regards to also federal trials as well, such as drug trafficking. I also do immigration, where that also varies depending on the type of clientele. So that could also go from any type of DACA relief to any type of deportation proceedings. So thank you.
Thank you, George. All right, Carolina.
Hi, my name is Carolina Shotland. I currently work for a law firm in McHenry County in Crystal Lake. It's called St. Cohen Wright and Saladin. My current area of practice is in personal injury and workers' compensation plaintiff work. So I represent individuals that are injured. And I previously also focused my practice in criminal law and a little bit in family law, but for the last 10 years, I've been exclusively doing workers' compensation and personal injury work. I've been an attorney for almost 20 years. I graduated from the University of Illinois in 2002 with my JD, and prior to that in 99 with a Bachelor of Science in Economics. And I did also go straight through.
Thank you so much. Alfredo?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Alfredo Tovar. I am a fourth-year attorney at a firm called Sherwood Law Group. We are a small firm located in the West Loop, and I primarily focus in areas of transactional law, including real estate, residential, commercial real estate, and also practice some commercial litigation. I graduated from Dominican University back in 2013. Took a couple of years off, worked as a social worker for seniors, and then went to DePaul Law School beginning in 2018. Graduated 2018, started practicing at Sherwood Law Group, and I've been here ever since. And those are the areas that I'm currently focused in. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. All right, Claudia, we can go ahead and get you on.
Hi, thank you for having me, even though out of all the panelists, I am pretty much just a rookie. I'm 24, going to be 25 at the end of this year. Currently, I have my paralegal certificate from DePaul. Undergrad, I went to Loras College out in Dubuque, Iowa. Got my double major in criminal justice and Spanish. And currently that's what I'm seeking as an employment. But with COVID and everything, it's been a little bit difficult trying to give somebody the opportunity when they don't fully have an experience in the area, when they want somebody immediately. While I was in undergrad though, I did have the opportunity to work with the public defender's office. And I thought that was great. Totally gave me a great opportunity to see the other half, because originally I did have the dream to be a prosecutor, but now I'm definitely seeing the other spectrum. So it's just from here, it's working hard to get into law school. So thank you.
Thank you. Claudia, and your perspective, even just getting, going into law school really matters a lot, because that means that you're going right through the journey of what needs to be happening and what some of these lawyers maybe already have gone through. So we're always welcoming that perspective. So thank you for being here, everybody. So let's go ahead and just dive in a little bit more on these questions. So the first question here that I have is, what was the most challenging part of being a first generation student / professional? And anybody can go ahead and just jump in if you want to do on mute.
I'll jump in here. I think probably one of the harder parts of being first generation is, a lot of the classmates that I had, especially in law school, a lot of their parents were already attorneys. So they kind of already had that background, that support, that experience from home. And my parents, my mom was a homemaker and my dad worked as a welder for his entire career. So I didn't really have that kind of that educational background that a lot of these other students who aren't first generation have. Fortunately, I did have an older sister who was the first from our family to go to college. So that was a great support on my end. But I think that's probably one of the harder parts. I'm sure some of the panelists here can add to that.
Yeah, if I can jump in. For me, I had obviously a very similar situation. My dad worked in construction, my mom was a teacher, and I was the firstborn. So I had to pave the way and try to figure it out. So I knew what to do up through college. What I didn't know is how to do the after part. So I knew that there was an LSAT. I knew that I had to do well on it. Aside from that, I really had no conception of like the different tiers of law school, and what kind of came with that. And I had the grades. I unfortunately, and this is by and large a systemic problem, was not good at standardized testing. So unfortunately, my LSAT score was not very good. And I didn't know, I'm like, well, what do I do? How do I prep? Like these little things that like people that have had people in their family can like, oh, you should go to this company, you should get this book. I had to figure that out all by myself. So it was just a lot harder. And obviously the crappy LSAT score didn't end up mattering because I'm here, right? But it was a longer and more difficult road because I had to figure it out all on my own. And there were deadlines that I messed up. There were things that went wrong that would have otherwise probably not gone wrong had I had somebody holding my hand. So that was, I think, the hardest part for me was like the getting into law school.
I mean, yeah, if I could piggyback off Raquel, I mean, most definitely I've had the exact same issues. Because nobody tells you you have to take this course, right? And it's financially also a burden when they say, oh, that it's just a waste of time, just grab a book and teach yourself. But sometimes you still need that extra hand to guide you along the way, say, well, you're getting such and such problems wrong, but with that course, it definitely gives you a guidance, because everyday education, even in undergrad, it doesn't exactly prep you for what LSAT is. It's totally a different aspect that, like Raquel says, at the end it doesn't matter, but law school does focus on that a lot because it will establish how good you will do in law school.
I think I'll just go a little bit further than that. You know, everyone here, you know, kind of explains the issue of the struggles and the complications of getting into law school, but then it, you know, even gets even more, I think, a little bit more complicated once you get into law school. The demographics of people that you encounter there is a little, it's different, I guess you could say. And when you're in there, it's hard to find some type of a group to actually attach to people and say you have some type of commonality with them and try to see if they could be able to help you. So when you don't see friendly faces, or at least ones of the same color, because you're just a first generation student at the moment, it kind of becomes somewhat of a solo road where you have to be able to guide yourself a little bit more than everyone else to be able to navigate, you know, not only law school in general, but also trying to figure out how to find the experience that's going to be needed for later on in the future.
Thank you. I wanted to take it a little step further. What do you think that colleges or universities can do better to support the needs of first-gen students, whether that is while you were in law school or even in your undergrad, to just kind of prep you for that next step?
Well, I'll just make a little expert. So obviously, you know, most campuses have like a mock trial type of thing, and, you know, somebody you could refer to. But in my experience, I mean, I didn't have the opportunity to join the team because I was always working to, you know, maintain myself. But when I did reach out, she kind of gave the practice test for the LSAT. But even then, I wish personally that they would have publicized it more. It's like, oh, if you're interested in law school future on, definitely, you know, reach out and we'll give you more materials. But even then, I feel like it should have been readily available to anybody that was interested. But what can you do?
Yeah, this is Monica. I'll jump in. I mean, I think for sure, like colleges and universities that know if students are interested in pursuing higher education, I think, any higher education, whether that's law school or med school or, any other graduate program, just having those resources available, not only online, which I just assume most colleges and universities do, but maybe they don't. So I think that having those resources available, and not necessarily just a bunch of links, but like, hey, here's like a step-by-step process of like, what do you need to do to get into law school? Okay, you have to, take your LSAT or GRE, which a lot of law schools are now accepting GRE instead. Next step, like think about your financial aid stuff. Here's what you have to do on that front. Your essays, looking into that, and like, just kind of making, giving you like a good checklist to go off of. And then I think also just, making people available that can talk to students who are interested in it to like answer their questions and whatnot. And the other thing I'll say is just, I think on the flip side, especially as a first generation student that, doesn't have parents or other family members that went to law school or went to, school of higher education, and don't know the process, I think it's really important to, try to get out of your shell and not be afraid to ask questions. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that I just didn't know the process, and I, being the person that I am, just found whoever it was that could answer my question, and just knocked on a lot of people's doors and asked a lot of people. And I think you'd be surprised once you reach out to someone and you say, hey, how did you get to where you are? And they'll be like, oh, I did this, this, and this. And then they'll meet you for coffee, and they'll try to mentor you in any way they can. I think people surprisingly can be very generous with their time and with their experience. So to the flip side of that, don't be afraid to put yourself out there and ask questions. And if one door slams in your face, then go to someone else.
I'd like to jump in to add, so I went to a really large university. I went for both undergrad and law school. And looking back, I remember as an undergrad, so the University of Illinois had an Office of Minority and Student Affairs, which was specifically designed to try to facilitate minority students' entry and integration into the college experience. Especially, U of I is in the middle of the state. It's in a cornfield. It's in East Central Illinois, and a lot of students, especially minority students, would have been coming from the Chicagoland area. So for a lot of students, it's a huge culture shock. And one of the things that they really tried to do was just to kind of give a mentor-mentoree relationship. But looking back on it, as an undergrad, it was really ineffective for me, because the only thing that I thought that they focused on was really academics, which, granted, if we're eventually getting to law school, we're probably doing pretty good on academics. I didn't really feel that was necessarily what I needed help on. And what they didn't help on, and this became more obvious later, my first year of law school, I actually was a graduate advisor for the Office of Minority and Student Affairs. What we never received education on is, the resources that might be available to help students, reduce the cost of college, to help students get, help for prepping for the LSAT, which I never did. I just didn't know that it was a priority. I didn't know you really had to. I didn't know there were resources for it. Help students with resources for grants and scholarships that might be available to specific students that aren't available to other students. And those are the kind of things that I think that colleges need to do better on, because there are lots of ways, especially for minority students and first generation students, to lessen the costs of college, not just with scholarships and grants and that kind of thing, but certain kinds of work opportunities, like being a teaching assistant. By the time you get to, graduate education, you're in a unique position to potentially be a teaching assistant, which means that you might be able to go to college basically for free, to law school for free. And that was never something that was presented to me. So I spent a year being a graduate advisor, making some money to help pay for law school. But my second and third year, I just managed to find somebody that was already a teaching assistant in one of the colleges and kind of got an in. But, I feel like, well, why wasn't the Office of Minority Student Affairs making those connections for us to help get more minority students in those positions to also be people that were able to represent and help the students that they were teaching in those classes have, more direct or more clear pathways and seeing somebody like them in the front of class. So I think that's where there's a bit of a deficit. There's just not enough of the explanation of resources that are available, especially when you're not getting that at home, probably.
Okay. Oh, anybody else want to add something?
Just a small little tidbit on the mentorship component. I think like the pre-law school stuff is one thing, and the logistical checklist, like Monica pointed out, super important. But I think something else that is that falls by the wayside is really kind of explaining and giving a true view into what it is the practice of law actually entails, because this is a whole world that if you're not ready for it and you don't know what you're getting into, could be a complete waste of your time and money and resources. And I know I have a lot of friends who have unfortunately had to go down that route because they didn't go forth and figure, like, vet this area out well enough. Like, I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer since I was 6 years old. Did I know what that meant? Absolutely not. So trying to figure out, because the practice of law is expansive. There's so many different things that you can do and so many different types of law that you can engage in. Like there are JD preferred careers, which are, you don't have to get barred in a state to practice, or there are just regular attorney positions where you do have to get barred. So there's just so much that you can do with the degree, and you want to know that if this is something that you're going to take on, that it's something that you actually want to do. And the only way to really know how, if it's for you, is to get mentorship. And like everyone here has kind of touched on, you really want to knock on those doors, poke your head and be like, hey, listen, what do you do? What's a day in your life like? Can I shadow you? Little things like that will definitely help, because it might be a personality thing. This may not be for you, but there's another area of law that might be. You never know. So I think having a pool of attorneys or people who are willing to give that insight would be super beneficial. I know NIU, and I was a political science major. They had a very small mentorship program, and unfortunately, it was very discouraging. The guy that I got put with, it was like, he's like, don't do it. He was in corporate law. And I'm like, I know I don't want to go into corporate law. Like, that's not me. So I'm like, the match just wasn't there. So luckily, I didn't let that sway my opinion one way or the other. But I wish that there had been more people that I could have, because you don't know where to start. There's just so much out there. And I think that was really overwhelming for me as an undergrad, trying to figure out, like, okay, well, once I get to law school, then what? So just having people to talk to that are in the field, because we all do different things, so, and all of our experiences are very, very different. So I just think that if schools had a basis, or a base of people that are willing to talk to students, I think that would be very beneficial.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to shift paths here. I want to talk a little bit more about maybe the path into law school. So is that maybe a defined path, or is it flexible? And the reason I ask is because, and I've told some of you already some of the discussions I've been having with my students, just kind of saying, do I have to major in maybe political science or a specific major in order for you to pursue law? And if so, would that be more of the defined path, or is there flexibility within that?
This is one of the areas that I'm a little bit more passionate about. Maybe I might have a stronger opinion than some of the other panelists. My opinion is that absolutely not. I think that a lot of times people do major in political science or some of the kind of more vague degrees, history, and maybe they do that with the objective of going into law. Maybe they end up kind of realizing that they don't want to go into academics and okay, what else are they going to do with that degree? But the truth is, law is unique in that you do not have to have any prerequisites to sit for the LSAT, unlike for the medical professions. So you can literally do any undergraduate degree. And I think it is probably more advantageous for students to pick something that they are passionate in and will do well in, rather than try to pigeonhole themselves into something that's not necessarily as interesting to them. Because you can literally be, you know, a kinesiology or a choral major and still go to law school. And, you know, there might be certain aspects of, you know, political science degree or history degree that are important, but I don't know that that's necessarily going to influence the kind of attorney that you are going to be or the area of law that you will practice. So my advice is you choose something that is interesting to you. The only time that it might matter is if you go into an area such as patent law, which has a little bit more of a rigorous requirements for certain backgrounds and certain science backgrounds. Very few people do that. So I don't know that it's very important unless you intend to do that. And you would have to know deep within your heart that that's what you want to do to maybe kind of make that path forward. And the only other thing I would say is there are certain schools, if you want to do certain things that might be better, that might position you better. You know, a lot of times as students that speak multiple languages, we think, oh, we're going to do international law, it's going to be great. Well, when you go to school in the middle of Illinois, you're not in the best position, you're not the best school to put you in the hands of people that are going to recruit out of that college. So you might want to position yourself, if you know, if you're going to go into, if you know you want to go in a specific area, then you might be looking at certain schools, but I don't think that your undergraduate degree is necessarily as important as just doing really well, and then trying to get into a law school that might position you for, you know, the kind of things that you want to do.
I'm gonna hop on that one. My apologies. I'm in court at the same time. So one of the things I think the complete, you know, being a first generation, for someone to say to me now that you had to be a political science major, I think it's a complete lie. You don't have to be a political science major in order to go to law school. I think that there's some type of foundation that you learn from political science at the end of the day that may just help you in regards to law school. But other than that, I really don't think so. I think I've met a lot of people throughout my life that, you know, that have majored in music or majored in mechanical engineering or some other type of area that sometimes people think, well, how could you possibly go to law school? But in reality, in life, I think that you're going to need a lawyer, you know, in almost every part of the business, whether it's some type of patent issue or business litigation, or some people that have just some type of extra knowledge in regards to some type of background of what possibly, you know, you may just encounter later on in life. I know what was big, you know, maybe a couple years ago was possibly healthcare, the Obamacare issue. So a lot of people got into, you know, healthcare, and then apparently the business of the law required a lot of attorneys that knew about kind of Obamacare and about healthcare systems. And so I think that I think the law and its business kind of invites any type of background into this. So I think that's kind of the most inviting part about this type of career.
Anybody else want to hop on? Before I move on?
I guess I'll just kind of add to that just a little bit, and then kind of just echoing my fellow panelists here. I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do this. I think everybody has the path that works best for them. I took a couple of years off because I wasn't sure if I wanted to make that financial commitment and get into some student loan law school debt. So I think don't feel the need to go to law school right after undergrad. I think 1-2 years just to kind of give yourself an opportunity, one, to maybe pay a little bit of debt off if you have student loans, and two, to figure out whether or not it's something that you really want to do. Because at the end of the day, it's a huge commitment, not only time-wise, but financially. And so, I think as far, and then just to kind of going on as far as like the major, I also majored in political science. Again, had no idea whether or not I was in the right path. But in hindsight, again, I would have, working now more in a business, in a commercial field, I would have liked to major in business or finance or something that would have given me at least a little bit of more of a background in the language and the terms that are used on a day-to-day basis. But otherwise, I think as far as majoring in a specific area, to echo some of my panelists here, just do something that is really interesting for you, and if it works out and you can continue to work in that field, great. And if not, at least you can make some connections that you may be able to use in the future, because ultimately you want to be able to rely and use those connections, because you want to eventually pay it forward too. So that's that.
Thank you. So I did hear a lot of you speak about the LSAT. So I am curious to know, what is it? And how do you prep for that? And what should students know beforehand? And, should they start considering, really being concerned about this now, maybe at their community college area?
It's a monster of a test. What else is there to explain about that situation? No, in all reality, the LSAT is, it's a very complicated test. It's kind of like an aptitude test to see, how far you are in regards to, your logical skills and your ability to assess, problems, I guess, like every other test, and in a time constrained manner. But really depending on where you're at, in regards to when exactly you want to go to law school is when you should start, right? I know that some of the panelists did take some time off, or they went straight through. I know I did go straight through. I would definitely say that in regards to going straight through, you would start somewhere between the junior year of your college experience. I know I started a little bit earlier to study for the LSAT, but I would say study as much as you can and practice as much as you can, because the logic of it doesn't really switch too much. It's just a different question with a different answer at the end of the day. They usually use the same type of pattern of situations to for almost every test. But I do believe that, it's always about preparing yourself. And I know that there are different programs that you could purchase that could help you with that. I know for a fact that I did one of them. I did okay, and then I just started studying by myself. So the more you study and the more prepared you are, the better you will do in your LSAT.
Yeah, it can be something as low tech as just checking LSAT books out from a library, which they have. And so you can check those out and you can do the practice tests, and you can just, pace yourself if money is an issue, because all those courses, they do take some funds, and they're usually not exorbitant, but a lot of times it's maybe needs versus wants, if it's something that you can afford or not afford. But the bottom line is you will do better if you know what to expect. So at the very, very least, do those practice exams, check out prior LSAT books. They have multiple exams that are available in each of those books that you can test. You could probably even find sample LSAT exams online. I haven't checked. It's been over 20 years since I've had to do an LSAT exam, so I haven't checked, but I would imagine that there's probably free resources online as well. But as a joke, at least there's no math on the exam. It is long, there's a lot of reading, but there's no math. That's not to say there's no math in law. If you do a tax law course, all of a sudden it's like, I didn't realize there was math in law, but every once in a while it pops up. But on the LSAT, at least there's no math.
I agree with both George and Carolina, on their thoughts. A couple things I'll add is just, I think if you can find, of course, if you absolutely cannot, find the resources to take a class, I think there are certainly like a lot of free resources out there, and, you just got to look for them. Hopefully, your undergrad will have some of information available about that. I think if you do have an opportunity to take a class, in my opinion, it was helpful. If anything, just to help me be disciplined in my studying. I think, folks, I'm sure, are juggling school. And if you're not in school and you took some time off like I did, where I had a job and so I was working, I did have, I actually worked a second job so that I could make money to pay for my LSAT course. And luckily I was able to do that. And I thought it was helpful just to keep me on track with studying, because not being in school, I wasn't like as disciplined, I think, with, getting home every day after work and then, forcing myself to study. So if you can take a class, I think it is helpful. I would say give yourself a time frame to do the test in. Some people, they psych themselves out. They're like, oh my God, this test is so hard. And you take a practice test and maybe you do really bad on it. And you're like, there's no way I could take this in a month or 2 months or 3 months. And then some people end up studying for like a year. I would not recommend that. I would say if you're going to study for it and you're going to do it, give yourself a 4 to 6 month time frame. Make a schedule for yourself and then stick to that schedule, take practice tests, study for it, and then do the LSAT no matter what. Just take the test. Because I think I know friends who have sort of put themselves in a position where they just like the test becomes bigger than it is, and it like takes over your life. You don't want that to happen. So I would say try to put in your mind, like, I'm going to give myself these 4 to 6 months to study, and then I'm going to take the test. And then I would say, I also just want to say that I think the LSAT has absolutely no bearing on what kind of lawyer you will be. It's a stupid test. I think it's silly. I don't know why they require it, other than it's just sort of a test of something else that they can measure you against. But I don't think it has any bearing on the kind of law student you will be or the kind of lawyer you will be. I hate standardized tests. I do not do good on them. And I took the LSAT twice. It's not an easy test, but I think at the end of the day, it does not impact at all what kind of lawyer you're going to be. And so it's really just something that like you have to put behind you. And I think I mentioned earlier, but there are actually a lot of law schools now that are accepting the GRE in lieu of the LSAT. So I would definitely look into that. If you, just decide, hey, I don't want to do the LSAT. I do think that some schools are accepting the GRE, which I don't think is as intense as the LSAT.
So since I'm still within that process of getting into law school, I could speak a little bit as far as the available resources at this moment. If you guys make your account with LSAC, there's resource of that's called Law Hub, that they also provide many practice exams and many prompts to get familiarized with the new software they're doing. Inclusive, I've spoken with a lot of people that they tend to go with the online material that goes along with the books with Kaplan, and they say that much of that information does help just to get familiarized with what it is, and it's many tutorials, stuff like that you could access.
I was having a thought while we were chatting, because I was applying to see if there were free resources. And I'm a trustee at my local library, so I'm familiar with all of these resources and the kinds of things that libraries want to do for you. a lot of libraries subscribe to something called Gale courses, which are it's kind of college level classes in a lot of different areas, and a lot of times they offer college prep classes, graduate school prep classes in as part of that subscription. So if you belong to your local library, check with them with their Gale courses. You might be able to kind of sit through for free an LSAT prep course, and also an ACT prep course if you have other siblings or something that needed to do that. But it's a free service that a lot of libraries subscribe to, and you can basically take the class as if you were taking it community college or a paid class. Additionally, one of the more challenging parts about the LSAT is that it's a proctored exam. It's timed. You have to sit there for a lot of hours. There's a lot of pressure, and if you're doing tests at home, you don't necessarily get that sensation. So my local library also often does ACT preps, kind of study simulated ACT exams. I don't know that they do it for LSAT, but there is no reason why they wouldn't do it for an LSAT if somebody went to adult services and say, hey, would you guys be willing to kind of moderate or proctor an LSAT simulation exam for a group of students. And I would also imagine the library at MCC would be willing to do that, and they may also subscribe to subscriptions that would enable you to access LSAT prep for free. So definitely check your resources at the library, because they might help you both in accessing those classes and for kind of a simulated proctored exam.
Thank you. All right, so I have heard many of you talking about the cost of different things, especially when it comes down to maybe the LSAT, maybe even the institution that you went to, and kind of considering all of those educational expenses. So what else did you have to consider on top of maybe your educational expenses, like at your tuition, books, and fees? What else did you have to consider for into saving up? I mean, Monica, I heard you talking about having 2 jobs just to even pay for the LSAT. So is that something that is really pricey? What should we be looking around here for range?
Well, just roughly, just take the exam. It's about $200. But on top of that, I can't remember the exact number, but there's an additional cost. It's a one-time fee. It's called the CAS. So it's some fee that they go and please somebody correct me if I'm wrong. It's basically a fee to go and get transcripts and all that, have it accessible into the system. So then you're able to put that in with your applications. So more or less, if for first time, you're looking at about $400 to take the exam and have your transcripts all given to the schools you're applying to.
So I'll kind of jump in here. So I ended up actually going to, obviously, NIU is a public school. So my tuition was already significantly lower than a private school would be. I did apply, that's the other thing. To apply to law school, you also have to pay fees. If I can remember correctly, I want to say they range from like $50 to $100 per application. And I think some schools do waivers for fees, but you have to like go and figure out whether one, you qualify and like what the rules and like deadlines and such for those are. So you do have to do that ahead of time if you want to get waivers. And then, so there's that, obviously the books and tuition. For a public school like NIU, it was very low. But it was still like 20 some grand, right? And to defer those costs, I was a graduate assistant, a teaching assistant, and a law clerk. So I had one each year. Financially, it was, so I ended up getting my law school tuition paid for all 3 years. However, it came at a cost. My first year of law school, they tell you don't work. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. So if you can afford to not have to work your first year to focus on the rigors of adapting to your first year of law school, do it. Obviously, that's going to take a lot of saving up on your end, if that's something that you want to do. But if you can't help it, you can't help it. And you're just going to really have to bust your butt and work really, really, really hard. Just for reference, I scraped academic probation my first year, or well, my first semester rather. So I was a 3.9 GPA undergrad. So law school is a whole nother animal. But understanding that you gotta get through law school is also important, like financially. So it's balancing those two things. I ended up graduating with honors from law school. So yeah, I put it into gear and I got it together, but like, it was hard because I'm like, do I quit this job? What do I do? Because I'm like, if I don't graduate from law school, I got nothing to fall back on. I have a poli-sci degree. What am I going to do with that? You know, so it was a midlife crisis or a quarter life crisis for me to try and figure out what I was going to do, because I didn't anticipate having to provide for myself in that way, because I thought, I'm like, oh, look, I got a scholarship. I got my thing paid for. So just to have that in the back of your mind, because that first year is really tough. And if you can afford to not have to work, I really recommend it. But again, if you can't, you can't. And it's not impossible because I did it.
All right, I have another question here. So I do hear a couple differences between different schools. So maybe like 3-tier schools and Ivy Leagues. What is the difference between those when you are attending for law school, and why is it beneficial to know the differences between those institutions?
So I don't know if I can really talk about the difference of the school I went to versus some of the other folks on this panel. But I will say that I think similar to the process of determining which undergraduate school that you're going to go to, there's sort of a similar process for maybe looking into law schools. I think some things to consider are when you're looking at different law schools is, you know, one, whether you have an idea of what type of law you want to practice. If you think, you know, and this can depend on whether it's just something that you're passionate about, or maybe you took some time off after undergrad and you may have worked with, you know, a lawyer and then determined, hey, this type of law is really interesting to me. But depending on like what interests you have, that may sway which law schools you look into. Some law schools, if you'd like to do like public interest type law, or some type of public defense, there are some law schools that are more geared towards that type of law, and have a lot of alumni that practice in that kind of law. And may have more resources that way. If you are really interested in environmental law, there are law schools that have, may have sort of better programs for that. If you're interested in doing, transactional type of law, so I would look at that. I think your interests, and then obviously financials. I mean, looking at, how much these law schools cost. And in my mind, there's always the possibility, for scholarships, and there is money out there. It's hard to get, but there's definitely some of those possibilities out there. And so definitely wouldn't cross a school off my list just because I wasn't sure about the money. Like I, try to do the research to look into, hey, does the school give scholarships, and how could I possibly get one if you've really set your sights on a particular school. And then I guess the other thing I would say is, maybe also looking at, the location of the school and what kind of opportunities are nearby. So one of the things that drew me to a school that was located in the city of Chicago is that there are tons of opportunities to do internships in the city of Chicago in the legal field. So you can work, as a judicial extern with a judge. with public defender's office, with, you know, various nonprofit organizations that do legal work. And there's lots and lots of opportunities. I think, you know, if you went to a law school that is maybe in a more remote area or outside of this, of a big city, it may be a little bit more difficult to find those opportunities, or there might be more competition for those opportunities. So that's also something to think about. There's probably a whole slew of other things, but those are just some things off the top of my head that, you know, you may want to consider when you're deciding, you know, which law school you might want to apply to.
I would definitely say, just because I kind of see a little bit of a difference. I know that the question was, you know, what is kind of the difference, and, you know, just kind of jumping off what, you know, Monica Pedroza was kind of saying, you know, at the end of the day, everyone's going to teach you the same. I mean, whether it's Ivy League or whether it's just DePaul or Northern Illinois, they're still going to give you all the fundamentals. I think at the end of the day that, you know, some are going to give you better connections than others, but it's really going to depend on what type of law, which again, I know we've been preaching to you that, you know, you never know what you're going to get, what type of law you're going to get yourself into. But if you kind of know a little bit about where you want to head down a road, you should really see the type of schools that you want to go to. I know that, you know, one of the things, if you want to go to Harvard Law School and then just become a public defender, I don't think that that's maximizing your, that's not going to be maximizing your capability and connections that what Harvard Law School may just give you at the end of the day. I went to Northern Illinois, so did Ms. Chavez. I think that they did a phenomenal job in regards to connecting you, which what they have the reputation for is connecting you with, you know, government jobs, especially with the public defender's office and the state's attorney's office. So our school has a great reputation of connecting you with those type of connections. And then obviously at the end of the day, you know, a lot of people that go graduate from our law school are either state's attorneys or work for the government or public defenders, right? I know I kind of started there and then kind of branched off a little bit into the private sector. But that at the end of the day helped me. And I know that for some, you know, we're a little bit more of a out there from the city of Chicago, but you know, I know everyone here, I think Mr. Tovar went to Chicago, so obviously he had much more, and so did Ms. Pedroza. They had more opportunity within Chicago, and you know, a lot of that has to do with kind of businesses and a lot of big law opportunities. So they can find those opportunities there within the city, which has to do with more about location.
And just to add to that, I guess just to clarify too, because I'm not sure if we actually confirmed that, but basically first tier is known as the top 50 schools in the country. These schools are always trying to differentiate each other, but then you've got top 14, which are, you know, your Yales and your Harvards and all the Ivy League schools. Second tier is 50 to 100. Third tier is 100 after that, you know, ranked 100. I think it's US News is one of the organizations that ranks them. But I think so. I don't even think I mentioned this early on, but I went to DePaul Law School, and so the reason I chose DePaul, although it's not a top 50, it's not a tier 1 school. I think it might be second tier. I realized that DePaul, it's in Chicago. You've got the undergrad here, and so you've got a lot of different networking opportunities. And so what I did was go on LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn it's you know, essentially free for most students. And what I did was try to network or meet other professionals who went to DePaul or went to Dominican University and connected with them. And that's actually how I got my my clerkship during law school. So yeah, I think you know, you don't necessarily need to shoot for the top school. I think as far as what you're looking to get out of your career and your professional experience, I think it really just depends. You know, if you really want to get into big law and you want to work at Kirkland & Ellis or, you know, one of these big law firms, national law firms, then may want to get into one of these top 50 schools, because you tend to, I think, make better connections or meet a lot more individuals who went to those schools. So if you're in that top 50 school and you want to work in the big law, that's, I think, a good route. But if you're not necessarily looking for the big law experience, or your goal is to get into a big law firm, then I think one of the other, second tier, third tier schools are fine, as long as you can be able to network and find individuals who went to those schools, because I think that allows you to make great connections.
I totally agree. And also, I've been in a position to do quite a bit of hiring or review resumes. And I see very few people come through this area, like in McHenry County, that went to, your Harvards and your Stanfords. So certainly if you can get into those schools, shoot for your moon. Your Northwesterns, shoot for the moon. You probably do get placed in a slightly higher stratosphere. And if it makes financial sense, and I don't know, I don't know what Northwestern's position, and I know, places like Harvard, their endowments are so huge that they can probably help offset a lot of costs for first generation and minority students, because they want to attract those students, especially if your academics are rigorous enough to get you there in the first place. So yeah, if you get into Harvard, go for it. Are you going to get into Harvard? Probably not. So then you're looking at, well, what are your opportunities? Where do you see yourself? If you see yourself working for a firm, Lake McHenry, one of the other collar counties, or even Chicago, honestly, it probably doesn't matter where you go, because people that are hiring are going to see schools from all over the area. And you can go to U of I and spend a little bit more than Northern. You can go to DePaul and spend a lot more than either Northern or U of I. And you have people that work at the same firm that coming from all of those different schools. So that doesn't matter as much, especially if you're going to go stay local. I think the only time it really matters is if, if for example, off the top of, from your heart that you wanted to go into the federal government. Okay, then maybe you're looking at Georgetown. If you wanted to go into international law, Georgetown's also probably a great school. Or, if you wanted to do other kinds of law, that might, and you're very, very specific about it, then you might want to see where exactly you go to school, and that might be a little bit more expensive than some of your more general options. But if you're a generalist, you just think, I want to go to law school, I highly recommend that you kind of look, as what George was saying, kind of make the most efficient decision possible for you, because at the end of your career, or at the end of graduating, and it's not unrealistic. I mean, I went to law school in undergrad a little bit over 20 years ago, where I think that was kind of like the cutoff point of school still being fairly reasonable. I mean, my undergrad tuition each semester was only $5,000, which at the time seemed high, but now you're like, those would be wishes and dreams. And I think law school was probably not much more than that per semester when I went to law school at U of I. And I did have financial aid, and I had some other things. And then, I had a teaching assistantship. But it is not, if you go to a liberal arts undergrad these days, or even U of I, which is $36,000 a year for tuition and board. So if you're looking at 4 years of undergrad and then you go to 3 years of law school, people are leaving these two institutions with over $200,000 of law student loans, which is a mortgage, which definitely restricts your capacity to make choices that are going to make you happy with your professional journey. So think about that in the future, because if you think that you just want to have a nice life and you want to live in Lake and McHenry County, and you're going to come back home, then make an efficient decision that's going to make economic sense to you, because it doesn't, like George was saying, it doesn't make sense if you go to Harvard, or if you go even, I don't know how it's going to play out with John Marshall being under University of Illinois, but before, I mean, John Marshall was an expensive school. They kind of admitted a lot of people. You could go there, you could, rack up a huge student loan debt. But if at the end of that, you wanted to be a public defender, the the payoff isn't, if you could have gotten into Northern Illinois University, that would have probably been a little bit more economically feasible if in the end, you wanted to be a prosecutor or a public defender, or even, law firms in our areas, just, they don't pay a huge amount of money. So it doesn't make a lot of economic sense to rack up $150,000 to $200,000 of student loans for law school.
And this is kind of tangential, but related. So I'm the only one that's out of state here. I don't know if any of you are planning on practicing out of state, going to law school out of state, but my journey was a little funky in that I didn't know that I was going to be making this jump to the East Coast until about right after my second year of law school. And that was strictly because I didn't like the idea of having to take one bar exam and be only barred in one state, and have to pay all this money for it. And I'm like, that's a waste. I want to be able to practice in a bunch of states if I want to. And luckily now Illinois is part of the uniform bar exam. And I chose New York as my launching point. So in the same vein, I found getting a job very difficult because I wasn't from New York. I wasn't from the East Coast. Nobody took me seriously that I was actually going to make the jump from Illinois to New York. So if you know that you are wanting to practice in a certain state, think about going to law school in that state and maybe find a state school and apply these concepts to that state. Just because I think you'll have a lot easier of a time trying to get a job afterwards. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So I know we're kind of cutting it close to 2:30. So I did want to ask my students to see if they had any questions. And if they don't, I'll just kind of ask my final question. So give me a quick second. It looks like we do have one.
Hello, I was just wondering how you guys deal with keeping a work-life balance and avoiding burnout.
We're all going to smile after that. Anyone want to put their opinion on that one?
Well, this is one of the areas where COVID has actually kind of been a mixed blessing, where in law offices for a lot of years, you still always had to show your face. And I imagine it works differently when you work for the government, but for private law firms, there was still that, showing your face, even if, maybe it wasn't as productive. And there was a lot of skepticism and suspicion from people working from home. And it just wasn't really a trend that law firms supported. They were kind of old school. They showed up every morning at a certain time. They just had certain, they billed, even though, my work was contingent. I kind of was forced to, show my billable hours, even though that's not how I earned money for the firm. So they just had a lot of old school metrics. And now it's just a little bit more relaxed. I've been working from home since March of 2020. I don't see that changing. And even some of my colleagues, they are kind of doing a very hybrid system where they are working from home or they're working from the office. There's not really a set schedule. It's a lot different if you see clients more routinely, but in my practice, I don't see clients routinely. I communicate with clients, phone calls, emails, texts. So I don't have to visit them face to face. And when I do have to go to my office or another office location, but that has been very flexible. And so I do see that as a trend that probably will continue when, by the time you're out in the workforce, you will probably see a lot more remote working opportunities, which I think will very much improve work-life balance for the legal profession.
So speaking from the perspective, I'm a city worker, I'm a state worker. So I work for the government. I am technically 9 to 5, but I absolutely work outside those hours. In fact, when I interviewed, they were like, just so you know, and you're aware that this is a 365-day work job. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure, that's fine. Because it was a job at the time. So, and they weren't lying. There are that first year of practice, you learn a lot about what you can handle and what you can't. I think work-life balance was taught to me through other attorneys' experiences, like that were older than me in the office, because you need to very much make boundaries for yourself. I think not answering emails unless they're absolutely urgent after 5 p.m. is big for me. Phone calls after 5 p.m. Nope. And frankly, like I do deal with people's lives. So if something comes in and someone's in the hospital and I got to figure it out, then I will figure it out. But if it can wait for tomorrow at 9 a.m., it will wait for tomorrow at 9 a.m. I think it's very important to also take care of your mental health. I think COVID did a lot of like mental gymnastics for me, at least. It's like, what did I want out of this job? Is this for me? Is this something that I want to keep doing? Because we were forced to slow down. We were forced to figure out what this job really was for us. And at least in my office, that's the general sentiment. But we are back in the office full time. The courts are opening up. I have 4 or 5 trials lined up within the next couple of weeks. So it's everything's hitting all at once, and taking care of your mental health is my at least top priority. And you really have to just make an effort to keep it. I don't know that work-life balance, and I obviously can't speak for everyone, but we kind of laugh at the idea because it's not exactly, you're not, I don't know, it's there, but it's not. It's there if you force it to be. If you let the job take hold and it runs your life, then it won't be. And that's kind of been my experience so far.
Okay, anybody else? I just want to make sure I'm not putting anybody off. All right, do you guys have maybe time for one more question, if maybe we have one? Is that okay? Okay, anybody else might have a question? All right, we got one more over here.
Hi, so I just have a question, like, I'm sure some of the panelists are like bilingual. Does like being bilingual help you in law work, or is it more difficult if you like work, obviously in Chicago, if you're more like in a diverse like community or something?
Being bilingual basically got me my first job in an area where there were not a lot of Spanish speaking attorneys. But there was a Spanish speaking population. But I will tell you that regardless of what kind of Spanish you speak at home, you will learn new vocabulary, and you will do it every time you practice a new area of law, because, you know, yeah, you grew up talking to your parents about daily things, or, you know, go clean your room, don't do this, you know, things like that. But you've never had to speak about, you know, torn ligaments and, you know, other kinds of legal aspects. So all of a sudden you're talking to somebody and you realize, oh my God, I've never said this word before in my life. I have no idea how to say it. And so you're still learning a new language, but it is very helpful, because especially more and more, you will be in communities where there is large Hispanic populations that are not represented. They're not represented well. And there's a lot of nuance in those populations, which, you know, need better representation, and need somebody that's just not working through interpreters, because there's a lot that's missing when you work through an interpreter. Even if that interpreter is, you know, that's their first language, there's a lot that's missing.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. So I work in the Bronx, and it's a huge Black and brown community. I think every single one of my cases has someone of color as the victim or the defendant, or both. And I use Spanish on a daily basis. I have victims that are only Spanish speaking, and I cannot tell you the leaps and bounds of hope in the system that they have when they hear someone that sounds like them. And it's very difficult being on this end of it. I mean, in general, as attorneys, we make up, I think, 4% of the total attorney population as Latinos. So those of us who are Spanish speaking are even fewer and far between. So if you have it, use it. It's definitely, again, like it was said, that I got my job because I spoke Spanish, and obviously they need people who are proficient enough to have conversations like these. It's not absolutely necessary, but it helps. It has absolutely helped.
I will definitely say that being part of the private criminal and immigration area in the Chicagoland. It's a big scarcity in Hispanic attorneys, but also people that speak any type of bilingual, other type of languages, but more, Spanish. They're in hot demand right now. They're in huge demand. Everyone's looking for a Hispanic attorney everywhere. So, I mean, it's definitely an economical advantage.
Okay, then I think that this wraps us up. So I appreciate you all. Can we give them a big round of applause? Thank you. I appreciate you all. So this is where we'll say goodbye, but we'll definitely try to have you all back again. This was an awesome presentation, so I'm so thankful for y'all. So thank you one more time. Have a great rest of your day.